welcome back to the Power of You Summit. I am your host, Phyllis King, and today's expert is Corrina Porterfield. She got her master's degree in wellness program management from Colorado State University. She went on to work at Lockheed Martin, as she calls it, their wellness girl, and began to discover all kinds of new ways that healing can come to be. Later, she would begin traveling to Mexico, Central and South America, where she began to study with traditional healers, earth-based medicine, a very different point of view than modern techniques in the Western world. And she has interwoven these techniques and modalities into her Western training to offer quite a unique service. And she's a very unique individual as well. So, Corrina, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. And I think it would just be wonderful if you could share in your own words your evolutionary pattern and how you came to be this particular brand of healer with such a broad range and approach.
Well, it started as a junior high schooler, and my friends, I was that friend that people called, like when they were having a hard time, and I just needed someone to listen. And I don't know, I just had this way of just being present for them. And as I was growing up, I was really into athletics and fitness and nutrition. My mom was an herbalist and she cooked really healthy food. And then there was just the time when you have to decide, oh, am I going to go to college? What am I going to study? And I went to Colorado State University, and they had this wonderful program called Wellness Program Management. And back then, wellness really wasn't even that big of a word. In the 80s, like wellness,
yes,
what's that?
What's
right?
Wellness? It's like something in the ground that you go and get water out of, right?
Right? So I'm sitting in this Wellness 101 class, and she puts spices up on the chalkboard, SPICES. And I'm like, ooh, what's this? And she started talking about spiritual wellness, physical wellness, intellectual wellness. Wellness involved with your career or your cultural wellness, and then emotional wellness and sensual sexual wellness. And I was like, what? Because I was aware of the physical realm. Yeah. So that was the beginning for me. So I was lucky enough to study it in college. And then, yes, I got a degree in wellness program management and got my master's, and ended up working for Lockheed Martin at Buckley Air Force Base. So I worked with Air Force, Army, Navy, Marines, and all these aerospace.
Did you do that on purpose? Or how do you get from that to yeah.
Yeah, I had a great advisor, and she's like, listen, this is your perfect job. It was textbook what I had studied in college. Health promotion for employees to help improve performance of the employees. And so I was hired to work with nutrition and exercise, and was there for about 6 or 7 years.
I'm just curious. I mean, I don't want you to lose your train of thought, but what was that culture like for someone with your sensitivity, or were you awakened enough at that point to understand the impact it might be having on your system?
It did have a big impact because the energy is intense there. And actually I worked there when 9/11 happened. So I had a high security clearance, and it took a lot to get onto the facility. And it was intense, but what I would find in my meditations, and I would be journaling information from my kind of higher self, and it's like I was this light. I was just this beacon of light. I was the wellness center girl. So people would come, and it was a place where they could just work out. They could have a chat. We talk about behavior modification, but in a way that wasn't so challenging. And I did a lot of stress management. And I felt like the little bit that I could do is I was activating something in some of the people there, because they're very programmed to see the world in a different way. Yeah, and then it was time to go. It was time to move on.
At some point, I mean, your professor was talking spices and all these different dimensions of wellness. But was there some point that you softened, that your science piece really softened, and you just became open to all these other points of view? Because it would seem like a science person would be in this lane, but suddenly you're just open to yoga. And you said it's the 80s, it's available and all that stuff. And then you're on a women's healing retreat and I mean, naturopathic. How did that transition happen? I'm curious about that because a lot of people try and make that transition and don't succeed.
You know, I feel like it was my soul's calling, and I just started having these synchronicities of right place, right time. And I had my own health crisis that made me wake up to the fact that there was more than just the allopathic way of medicine. And I had a diagnosis of endometriosis, ovarian cyst, and I ended up in the emergency room with a ruptured cyst and a wake-up call and had surgery. And that's when I started exploring other options of, this is what the surgeon said. Essentially, what we've done here is pulled weeds. And they're going to grow back, maybe, you know, in 3 months or, you know, a year. So I came out of my surgery, and endometriosis is just when you have a tissue growing on the inside of the pelvis that doesn't belong there. And I was just, that didn't sit right with me. Like, this physician told me that the destiny of my healing is that this stuff is going to grow back. And it was almost like I wanted to prove to him that it didn't have to happen that way. So I started acupuncture and, you know, yoga and meditation and visualization and all of these ways that we can holistically help the body to heal instead of just having surgeries or taking medications or taking hormones or whatever the case might be for individuals. So that was my wake-up call.
That's incredible. That must have been pretty frustrating coming out of that after going through the procedure and then having the doctor tell you, yeah, but this isn't really going to work long term. That's got to be kind of frustrating in general.
Yeah, it was frustrating, especially when it did come back. And that's when I just realized through the synchronicities of finding natural healers where they're like, there's a lot more than just physical here. You're holding a lot of emotions in your body. There's a lot of stuck energy. And I'm like, tell me more. What do you mean? And I had my degree in wellness, but it wasn't until I really had to practice all those aspects that I really understood it.
Okay, well, we're going to have to dig into that at some point, but I want to go back down to South America now. So you had some friends and they said, hey, let's go to Belize and let's do a women's healing retreat. And we're going to, was it a trip, just a party? I mean, what did you think was going to happen?
Well, you know, I just quit my corporate job and I was doing massage full time. Again, a synchronicity. I was in a car accident and the PT who was working on me said, hey, I need a massage therapist. Do you want to work here? And I'm like, okay. So next thing you know, I transitioned out of my corporate job and was working at a PT clinic, getting the last of my prerequisites. And in a corporate job, a lot of people can relate to this. You get 14, maybe 10 to 14 days of paid time off. And all of a sudden I was like a sole proprietor and I could work really hard one week and take time off the next. I could have long weekends. So my girlfriend was like, let's go to this women's healing retreat. And there was a couple gals in Denver that would take a group of women often. And I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but my intuition said, yes, you're going. So we're on the airplane and all these women are reading this book, Sastoon, by this woman, Rosita Arvigo. I'm like, who's Rosita Arvigo? And we get down there and she's this amazing woman who had moved to Belize and learned from the last Maya shaman, Don Eligio Ponte. And she did a 12-year apprenticeship with him and had written this book. And it was all about women's health and abdominal health and spiritual healing with the plants and the water. So I arrived there a certain person, and when I left, I was a completely different person. I had such a profound healing experience in Belize.
Oh, okay, we have to hear what got healed.
Everything. You know, in their tradition, they believe that there's spiritual illnesses, which in the United States, we see anxiety, sadness, and grief, or anger. You know, there are issues that we can treat with talk therapy or drugs. And down there, they see it so differently. And they do a pulse diagnosis and they work with plant spirits and prayer and faith. And one day they were talking about this spiritual illness called tristeza, which in Spanish means sadness. And it's the kind of sadness that you just come into the world with, and you don't know why it is that you have this low grade sadness. And so they started speaking about, well, you know, it's for often babies that are unwanted, or if you were supposed to be a boy instead of a girl. And all of a sudden, I just felt so emotional, and I was just crying because I was the third girl, and I was the third try for a boy, and I was supposed to be Michael David. And so in utero, I knew that who I wasn't fitting what the desires were of the family unit outside. So something got triggered within me. And and it's the land. Belize is such a powerful land, and it's so healing there. In the grander scheme of things, stuff just starts to pour out of you. And I had this lovely experience where these granny healers came into the room and were whispering prayers in Spanish with these plants that they had gathered on my wrists and on my forehead and on my heart. And I was just sobbing and feeling this grief and sadness of not being good enough, or I was wrong being who I was. It was such a profound feeling. And as they were whispering these prayers, it just lifted. This heaviness, it just lifted. And all of a sudden I could take a deep breath. I could see more clearly. I felt more room in my body. And I was like, what is it that just happened? I have to learn more about this, not only for myself, but for other people. It was profound. And that was the beginning of me exploring medicine that was beyond what I had learned in the United States. It was the indigenous oral traditions that were handed down. Well, Rosita Arvigo had a program at the time where you could learn how to do, they called it Maya abdominal massage, which is a technique that they use down there, the sobraderas, the midwives. They believe that if a woman's uterus is centered, that she will be more centered in her life. And where our culture, if you go and you get an exam and your uterus is tipped, they say, oh, that's normal, but it's not normal, it's common. So with this spiritual healing, they were also doing massage on the belly and the womb area, the lower belly. And I wanted to learn how to do both the physical and the plant spirit medicine. And they had a program, and you could sign up, and you did like the self-care first, because it's very important to treat yourself. And then you could take professional training. So I actually flew down.
You went another time. Okay, you were telling me. Go ahead.
Yeah, for the next 7 to 10 years, I was flying down there and learning the techniques and experiencing the healing, and then was able to, after a year-long certification program, came to Portland. And I was the only one in Portland doing this kind of work. Portland was ready for it. So when I came, we created a community, we started doing trainings here. And that was, everything's a diamond. And this was just one facet of all of the things that I was studying. But it really was the catalyst that changed my life. And I actually ended up not going to naturopathic medical school because my soul felt so fulfilled by this traditional medicine that it was enough, and it was powerful. And my life was changing, people around me, their lives were changing. Because we like to project onto the people in our lives that they're making us feel a certain way. Or if they would just change, I could be happy. But really where the magic is when we go, ooh, what within me is getting triggered? What is it that I need to be aware of right now? And how can I shift it within myself instead of needing someone else outside of you to change? And so we start to look at the beliefs, because sometimes we think people are critical of us, but really it's our own self-criticism that we're projecting on them, and they're just mirroring it back. So it can be really complicated in relationship with other people, because we need to take care of ourselves first, then our family, friends, then, the activist that's trying to save the forest or the ocean, but they aren't doing any of their work. It's just never going to be enough, and they're going to constantly feel out of control. But if we can all come back to this place of sovereignty, that's how the collective consciousness rises together.
Well, you know what? I love that you said that, because I was going to ask you for a little bit of wisdom to share with people and something they could really take with them. And that is like an amazing message, you know, put the mask on yourself first, and that we can have these great intentions, but if we're not coming to a process whole and healed at our highest vibratory frequency, then it'll be fragmented what we do. So that's a lovely nugget.
Yes.
Do you have another nugget? Since
I do. I can feel like something wanting to push out.
Okay.
Is, I think what I've found with a lot of my clients is they feel like, oh, now life's going to be easy. You know, like say you have a session and you're like, okay, I'm over that. And we crave the ease, we want the comfort, but really we just need to know that the personality and the mind and the ego like comfort. The ego wants to keep you safe. The mind wants to talk you out of things that are a little like, mm-mm. So comfort is there. However, the soul wants challenges. The soul wants difficulties, and it will magnetically draw into your life people who will challenge you or situations. However, if we're grounded and centered, then it's like storms come and go. We just kind of weather the storm. What did we learn from that, and how do we move on? So the most important thing is like in the now, not remorse or regret about the past or projecting into the future a possible outcome that may never happen, that's creating stress in the moment, but just coming in the moment and going, what is it that I can be aware of right now to be most aligned with my true self or my heart, soul, or whatever. And I have to ask myself that multiple times a day, because I get caught up, I get hijacked, I get overwhelmed. And it's important to just, where am I in all this, even when there's chaos all around? Like, what's my truth?
What's my truth? I love that. And we all have one.
We all have, and your truth is going to be different from moment to moment. My truth is different. And, you know, so I think one of the biggest things with my clients that I hear is that we matter, and we're good enough, and we're worthy, and we don't have to look outside ourselves for other people to validate us. And when we know that deep within ourselves, it is the most liberating and freeing experience to know that. It's like I can't even put it into words. That through that, knowing that you matter, and being grounded and embodied with that, it's such a homecoming, and it's our birthright. And then that radiates out, and other people are like, I want what you got. They're like, what's going on with you? And, you know, it's like, that's what we want to have, instead of everybody having this doomsday, we're all going to hell in a handbasket mentality, which is perpetuated by all the things around us. It's like, wait, no, that's not true. And then we can honor other people's truths, because everybody's truth is different.
Well, and on that wonderful nugget, I think that's a perfect way to end the interview today. But Corrina, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for just being you. And your website, CorrinaPorterfield.com, has everything about your pilgrimages and your services. And I hope everyone will visit that and take advantage of all your resources. Well, thank you again, everyone, for tuning in today. We'll have a new expert tomorrow. I am your host, Phyllis King. Have a wonderful day.